people don't feel indifferent about the walk. They come out and they say they love it. And I think what's going on there, it speaks to the power of social connection that all of us get by being together, and the power of physical activity and all those juices we get inside, the endorphins, the serotonin that make us feel so good.
Dr. Sabgir is a cardiologist in Columbus, Ohio, who's been practicing for nearly 2 decades. Early in his career, he shared frustration that while working to help his patients improve their health, he was not having the impact he desired. At one point, he mused, if I could just write a prescription for wellness that included activity, especially walking, I might be more impactful. Dr. Sabgir began inviting patients to walk with him and his family in a local park, hoping to reverse the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle by offering health education while walking. It worked. From that concept, he launched Walk with the Doc. In this Squeeze the Day, join us to meet an amazing healthcare hero, to learn how one spark ignited his entrepreneurial spirit to help him and others across the globe live their best life.
I'm Sally Hussey, the CEO of 50 Forward, and we elected to launch this podcast because we know older adults have such inspiring stories and wisdom worth sharing. We have now all learned that social connections are critical to our well-being. This podcast is made possible by 50 Forward, the leading resource for adults 50 plus in Middle Tennessee who seek to live longer, more fulfilling lives.
Today's Squeeze the Day is brought to you by the All of Us Research Program from the National Institutes of Health. Learn how you can help change the future of health by participating in the program. Visit www.joinallofus.org to learn more. I'm Susan Sizemore, Communications Director for 50 Forward, so let's get started. Welcome, Dr. Sabgir.
Thank you for having me, Susan.
I'd like to ask you a few things about your career. What made you focus on a career in medicine and specifically to become a cardiologist?
Yeah, I always felt people were at their most vulnerable, and that seemed like a great opportunity to connect with people and help them. That's always something I wanted to do from ever since I can remember. I had a wonderful role model as a uncle who was a cardiologist in Texas, and the way he handled himself, it always inspired me. And then going through med school, I kind of, in residency, had that in the back of my mind, and then fortuitously found out that my personality matched best with the other cardiologists, and it was actually a pretty smooth path.
Will you share some of the biggest challenges you have when you're working with cardiac patients?
Sure. Physical activity is so critically important. Just going for a simple walk, as we were talking about before, and our built environment makes that more and more challenging, as a lot of us have many responsibilities, and a lot of our towns and cities are set up for driving. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is we have this incredible weapon against chronic disease, and it's a little more challenging than we would like to be using it.
And why do you think that is?
I think all of us are being tugged in so many directions, and I think at times we feel we need to be physically active. We think that's going to involve changing clothes, having a gym membership going, and then being intimidated at the effort we have to put out. And in reality, just walking out our front door or going to a safe place close by and going for a moderately paced walk has essentially all the same benefits as, say, sweating it out on a treadmill.
That's a good point. I think I read something in one of your past interviews where you made a statement about working to park at a distance from the location you were visiting, for example, and getting in your steps by doing things like that. Are there other things people can do? That's a great example.
Yeah. So first, I do recommend having some way of tracking your steps. I think that's the way I keep myself accountable and, get credit for what you're doing. So we know about parking far away. I kind of like to take the approach of making life just a little more challenging, taking the stairs, maybe raking ourselves instead of, hiring the kid next door to do it. Just finding ways, taking the little extra longer path, and all that adds up to give us incredible health benefits. And I think having a pedometer either on your watch or your belt or however you like to, or your phone, is a great way to kind of give yourself credit. I think it's also fun to build in rewards for yourself, whatever they are, once you achieve these important numbers.
Tell us about your life as a child and your roots.
Very simplistic, average Joe. Grew up and have stayed in Ohio, in Columbus, which is in the central part. Went to undergrad at Miami University in Ohio, and then did my training for med school in Toledo, Ohio, and then back to Columbus for internship, residency, and fellowship. So it's really important for me to be around family, which I'm very fortunate, and also to have the means to take weekend trips and little getaways. That's what's worked best for my family and I, but very modest, uneventful upbringing. And I should probably be very grateful for that.
So let's talk a bit about your career. Early in your career, you stated that you were frustrated and felt that your efforts as a cardiologist were ineffective. And I want to know why that was so frustrating.
Oh my gosh. Still is at times, but now I feel so much better about having this option. We were talking about the importance of physical activity, and for thousands of patients through residency and fellowship and into, starting with the practice, would spend, after we talked about stents or bypass, blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, we would talk about what we could do to prevent it. And physical activity and a healthy diet are at the top of that list. And I was connecting with the patients, and it felt really good. I thought I was actually better than most at communicating the importance of physical activity. And, when patients would leave the office, I felt like I'm doing a pretty good job. And it turned out it was the opposite. I was essentially 100% ineffective. And it took me a number of years to realize, but when the patients came back for their 6 or 12 month follow up, they weren't physically active at these 150 minutes a week or even a fraction of it. And I didn't want to play that charade for the rest of my career, is because you have to have these conversations. Every doctor should be talking to their patients at least for a little bit about how critical just simple walking or whatever your favorite flavor is. If it's biking or swimming, that's great too. But I didn't want to have these conversations and feel good, when in reality, I knew that, just like in a cooking show, when you go an hour later and you take the turkey out of the oven, like it just wasn't working. And I was looking into the future. I was like, I don't want to be getting that gold watch 30 years from now thinking I did a good job, when in reality, I was not addressing this critical need. So that was the frustration, where honestly, I wanted this very first patient I asked to have to say no to my face. And it's still, to this day, I want to put that patient in a position where it's not like, yeah, I'll get to that. I want them to know that we care enough, and that we're very fortunate to have hundreds of docs around the world. And the people that sign up with us are really special, caring individuals that want to make a difference. And I want them to know that our healthcare providers, whether it's physicians or nurse practitioners, really care about them enough to give up their Saturday morning or whatever time they choose. But also, we need to make this real. We can't put physical activity and our, a healthy diet on the back burner. It needs to be up front. There's too much to gain, too much quality of life. Life is too great. I
Mm.
hate to see people burdened with chronic disease, and it doesn't have to be that way. We've got the solution. We just need to deploy it.
So, was that the impetus for Walk with the Doc?
It was.
Let's talk a little bit about that first walk. What was that like, and how did you get there?
April 9th, 05. It was 6 months after that very first patient I mentioned. Collected about 1,000 emails from successive patients that were interested in hearing about Walk with a Doc. There is a strong interest in the community, and established a partnership with the Columbus, Ohio, where I live, the metro parks, and the docs that start have seen the same thing. There's a lot of community partners that feel strongly as we do, and want to support. So it was establishing those partnerships, and we had over 100 people at the very first walk in April. There were a couple TV vans there. That made me a little nervous, just in the sense that I didn't want this to be like a one-time event. The media is not going to be there every week, of course. So I know in my heart and my DNA, this needs to be part of the fabric of our healthcare system. It just feels too good when we're walking and in the office having this option. And so it was a spectacular morning, and we've continued to have hundreds of those over the years.
So, what are you hearing from others across the globe who are involved with Walk with the Doc? And might you have a success story to share from a participant, because you have blossomed in the time since 2005?
Thank you. Yeah, we have grown thanks to our partners, thanks to our incredible team of Rachel Habash and Brian Romy, and the thousands of caring volunteers around the world that are taking part. I just had a really great conversation with a friend, Amy Bantham, and she shared what we're blessed to hear is people don't feel indifferent about the walk. They come out and they say they love it. And that is something that I'm not smart enough to have designed a program that people are going to love and throw enthusiasm and talk about with exclamation points. I think what's going on there, it speaks to the power of social connection that all of us get by being together. And of course, all of us missed during the last couple of years, and the power of physical activity and all those juices we get inside, the endorphins, the serotonin that make us feel so good. So, of course, that's a universal feeling, and the walk's been an incredible gift to be able to watch it grow, help support it grow.
So, how many communities are you in now?
Yeah, that number fluctuates right now. I think today it's around 545 communities. Very lucky. I think we're adding our 49th state in the next week or two. And then I think
Mm.
it's around 45 countries. And another stat that I'm really excited about is we're in, I think, 35 medical schools right now. And that program is called Walk with a Future Doc. These med students are so great. They care so much. And to have them supporting the program and taking part is fantastic.
I feel like in some respects we're looking at the future of medicine, and wouldn't that be great if we all got more in control of our own well-being and work to get some sort of movement in with our medications, if you will. We learned about Walk with the Doc because we now have a chapter in Nashville led by Dr. Amy Price Neff. How do you find doctors who want to participate in your program?
So when it started in '05, we actually had to hold off for a year because no one would answer my phone calls as I tried. And I've learned that being proactive is tough. But if we get a huge net cast, or, I think this is the way they get olives from trees. You just shake the trees, and there's, I think, 9.1 million doctors around the world. And while the US has close to 900,000, there's hundreds of thousands more incredible nurse practitioners and physician assistants and healthcare providers. So it's casting that broad net through. If we're fortunate to get earned media or things exactly like this podcast, where the doctors that have that in their DNA hear about it and then they reach out and we get them started.
I also want to talk a little bit about some of your blogs because I've noticed in your blog posts that you or one of your content writers has great wit, and I can see part of it probably originating from you. And I'm wondering, how does a sense of humor fit into your life and your practice?
Well, it's very kind. I'm the writer. Started on Thursday nights. I would drink a Diet Mountain Dew. So it was towards the end of a long week. And that was my journaling or my therapy. And it all started because I didn't want to say every Friday, our newsletters go out on Friday morning. I didn't want to say, hey, we're at Big Meadows picnic area at 8:30. We'll have coffee and bananas and we'll see you there. No one wants to read that. So I started getting pretty goofy and have gotten into a trouble once and again, just with hundreds of newsletters. But we're trying to take the stigma away from medicine. I think there's so much fear, and a lot of times we feel it's out of our hands when in reality, 80% of cardiovascular disease, at least, is totally preventable. Some things, of course, are not. And all of us know those people where there wasn't anything that could be done. But in the lion's share, we can handle it. So we're trying to make the water warm, allow people to realize that they can take care of themselves, they can make a difference. And by keeping it lighthearted and hopefully providing some humor, it'll grease those skids.
Hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about being a CNN hero. First of all, congratulations. That's huge. And I'd like to know what it felt like to not only receive that kind of honor and visibility, but kind of where that played into the growth of Walk with a Doc.
Yeah, that was in 2015, and they were fantastic then. And they told us it would change our program, and it did. We had nearly 700 requests from physicians within a week or two of being on CNN.com and being on TV. And that really helped transform our program. Anytime it comes up, I was told at some event years ago, and when they were addressing the crowd, like anytime someone brings it up, use that as a window to grow your program and invite others to be a part of it. And that's what we try to do. But I must say, CNN heroes and Sanjay Gupta have continued to be authentic, real, helpful, great people with really big hearts that want to make a difference. So very grateful to them.
Let's talk a little bit about health and the importance for all ages. And also, I'm curious to know, what countries are you seeming to see where there's a demonstrated longevity or better health, especially when we're talking about older adults?
You're probably familiar with blue zones. The Buetners have done a great job with that. And, I know Japan has great stats, and the Norwegian countries. A lot of it involves where, it's the community having those. I think the term is moai in Okinawa, where these Japanese citizens are basically paired with each other at birth in these small groups, and they take care of themselves into their 90s and hundreds. So that social community is huge. So countries and areas that focus on that in the States, I know Loma Linda's selected area. And then being outside, having a lot of outdoor stuff is critical to good health, as well as, of course, physical activity. I think my parents were recently over in the Norwegian area, and lots of bikes, like more bikes than you can imagine. So that positive outdoors physical activity and strong social connections are critical. There's a lot of data coming out now on social isolation, increasing hospital admissions, increasing the length of admissions. And we kind of stumbled into that at Walk with a Doc. It was started for physical activity, but we've learned that's a social connection, something that our incredible Surgeon General, he wrote a wonderful book called Together, has issued almost, I think, an actual call to action on social connection. And the importance of eliminating loneliness.
That's interesting on a number of levels, and it makes me want to dive into more of the research. I'm also curious to know if better health can be linked to diet and exercise and the environment.
Yeah, so there have been recent studies showing that you really want to have both. There's an effort called nutrigenomics where some of us do better with different diets. Like one diet doesn't fit
Mm.
all. And what we do know is, as we've all read, Mediterranean diet is very successful. And the more fruits and vegetables we can get into our diet, with a whole food plant-based diet being maybe the pinnacle of a good healthy diet. And pairing that with physical activity is critical. And you know what you alluded to about the environment, unfortunately, there are many citizens that just by living one street away from another, our life expectancy may be much less, even though you're in the same area. So it's critical for us to be aware of that difference and do everything we can to mitigate it. It's also separately extremely important for us to be outside when you talk about environment. More and more data coming out of Earth Labs at the University of Washington and elsewhere, speaking to the health importance of being outside. And right now, we know the dose to be about 120 minutes a week of outdoor time or more, ideally more, but that can have a tremendous impact on our health.
I'm wondering, because our focus a lot is on older adults, what should older adults do to stay active when the conditions are not optimal to walk outdoors?
Yeah. I think if you can set that 150 minutes as a benchmark, and there are times where I'm in the same camp where I just, the thought of going outside is not ideal. I think it doesn't have to be all or none. So the more time we can be outside, taking our walks or rollerblading or rock climbing, whatever our favorite thing to do is, the better. But there's going to be times, and don't beat yourself up if you're going to walk at the mall or ride on your indoor bike or do walk at home with Leslie Sansone. All that stuff adds up and counts, and live to fight another day. The key is just trying to get that 150 minutes or more a week, and ideally strength training for a couple hours as well. And if you can't do it that week, you'll get them the next week.
So I know a lot of us think about optimum number of daily steps too. Do you have a step count for older adults?
Yeah, it doesn't differ for me. As a cardiologist, I regularly see people in their 80s and 90s, and a lot of them are going after their steps and getting 10,000 steps or 15,000 steps. Not all of us can do that. I think the magic number is probably around 7,500 if you can average that. And there's days where maybe you have 5,000, but there's going to be some days where you can get more than the 7,500 and make up for it. But that's a special number, 7,500. That's kind of where the magic happens.
Okay, that's good to know. So I have a question now that we ask all of our guests, and it relates to advice that you might have received from an older adult or a parent at the time. You might have thought this really is silly or doesn't make any sense, but now it rings true in your everyday life. Is there something like that comes to mind?
Yeah, a couple. My amazing grandmother would say, nothing's a problem unless you make it a problem. And I think I certainly didn't understand it back then, although I probably should have. But now it makes a lot more sense. And my father always says, consider the source, which I find myself going to a lot.
Very good advice. My closing question is, Dr. David, what is it that you do to squeeze the day?
You know, there's so many great advisors out there. I've learned that life is really a gift. And I try and plan the next day the night before, and I wake up and I think gratitude is wonderful. It puts me in the right frame of mind, and I will list 3 or 5 things I'm grateful for that morning, and that really helps me squeeze the day. And I try and do, so as all of us do, so many things during the day, and you can't be great at everything on one day, but maybe over time you can become pretty proficient at a bunch of stuff. Some days you'll win and other days you won't. But it's life is a gift, and I'm very grateful for this wonderful country we live in.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. What an amazing life of leadership we're witnessing from interviews and stories such as yours. Now we challenge everyone listening to go squeeze the day.